the booth. Welcome, anyone who's watching. We're live on Facebook right now, and we will wait for people to get in. We're here for the Voiceover Livecast. Every other Thursday. So we'll just see who shows up. We'll see if Richard is first. Man, you're like clockwork. I'll bet. I'm just guessing. Richard, you and I could have some interesting discussions about numbers and stuff. I'll bet you're kind of into that, like I am. Punctuation, or not punctuation, being punctual on time to things. And hey, Rick. Hi, Don. We're just waiting a couple minutes here, let people get in here, and we'll get started. It is rainy in Columbus. It's supposed to be like that all day, and then we're going to have a really nice weekend, which is good because we've got an outdoor show Saturday at Three Oaks Vineyard, which is going to be really nice. And Friday, I'm playing out at Leaping Lizards in Hilliard. Been out there for about 5 years or so. I'll give it just a little bit more. So, actually, this week, just a couple days ago, finished book 3 of Michelle Pollock Dalton's series. It's the Out of Africa series, and I just finished Out of Desperation, book 3. So that is, it's been submitted, and it's being reviewed. Should be out there within a week or two. And I'm going to be working on other books for other people from now until November. And then in November, I'm going to do books 4, 5, and 6 all in a row. Hi, Tim. And don't worry, no sexy talk today. The book I'm reading from is not like that at all. Well, yeah, there's a part of it. Wait, it's not going to happen today. So don't worry about that. So if you're at work, it's pretty safe. I'm actually going to be, I read from this months ago. It's called Androcide. And it's got like intel, it's got spies, and a guy wanting to dominate the world with certain genders. So there's a whole bunch of scientific stuff going on there. Hi, Mary. How are you? Sometimes I think the streaming takes away the quality. I think they sacrifice the sound quality just to make sure the video is smooth. I don't know. Or I could be too far away from the iPad, but I can't. I don't know if I can really put it anywhere closer. I'll tell you what. Let me try it. Let's stay. Hi, Sandy. Oh, okay. Hopefully that's better. So this book that I'm going to do, Androcide, by Erec Stebbins, very interesting. It's got a lot of cool stuff going on, and I'm going to be doing another of his books starting in September, so probably about 3 weeks from now, and it'll probably be around the same thing. Good. So I'm just going to go ahead and get right to it, because I've got to, right after this, just keep working on the new book I'm doing. It's been a pretty constant schedule, which is really nice, actually. And on that note, I know I've been talking for quite a while about slowing down, and I'm looking at being busy with audiobooks through the end of the year, maybe even through January at this point. So I think that's going to actually allow me to schedule next year lighter, like I've been planning on. So I'm kind of excited about that. I average about 15 to 17 music events a month, whether it's hosting an open mic or playing. And I'd like to get that down to about a dozen or so, because they are getting physically taxing. But this is easier. I just gotta have the voice for it. So we're gonna go with Chapter 8. Hi, John. Hey, Candace. Chapter 8. One Small Step. The 12th Precinct morgue spanned the city block. Dedicated rooms kept corpses chilled in rows of refrigerated storage lockers. Crime labs buzzed with forensic scientists sampling DNA, running ballistics, and examining the most minute gunshot residues with an electron microscope. The autopsy suites adjoined the cryogenic storage rooms. In one such room, fog and stink rose from a gray corpse atop a stainless steel examination table. A long, Y-shaped incision split the corpse shoulder to shoulder, meeting at the sternum and extending to the pelvis. Scalpels, saws, and other stained paraphernalia glinted on a tray. The medical examiner had closed the body after inspection, but for the peephole in the pelvis opening to the internal organs. The three detectives waited by the corpse of Jack Reaper. In front, a thin, older man in a white lab coat gesticulated, highlighting anatomy of the cadaver. The younger detectives writing as he spoke. "As you can see, there is extensive bruising across the entire body," said Sutherland, his eyebrows raised as he moved his index finger lengthwise. "I've never seen anything quite like it, actually. The patterns, blood vessel bursting. In fact, there's evidence of deep trauma to internal organs and other tissue, massive internal bleeding. I might not know how to interpret it, except for the rather obvious other signs of torture, and the cause of death." "Which was what?" said Sacker, tiring of the old man's theater. "I'm getting to that," Sutherland responded. "But as for the bruising, while I can't say for sure, it's obviously from some kind of blunt force trauma, perhaps a special torture device by the perpetrator before killing the victim." The examiner moved toward the pelvis. "Now, there is no more obvious sign of physical damage to this body than the removal of the genitalia. The clotting and vesicle patterning here clearly indicates that the victim was likely dead when it happened." "Thank God," whispered Snyder. He swallowed. "I said, likely. There are other anomalies that complicate..." "There are other anomalies that complicate interpretation and analysis, but I'll get to those. The cuts are surgically precise. Whoever did this had a very steady hand. It would be required, of course, that the victim not move for such precision. And indeed, we find evidence of harsh restraints on the body, although those may have only been in place for the torture." Hill shuddered as Sutherland pointed out bruised and raw skin around the wrists, ankles, thighs, midsection, and throat. "Looks like the head was also directly restrained with bolts. There are pressure wounds on the skull. Not invasive, but terribly tight and painful, I'm afraid." "He was strapped down, and they did all this to him?" Snyder said, a look of horror on his face. Indeed, yes," said Sutherland, smiling. "Quite the setup, isn't it? Our victim seems to have been put out of his considerable misery by asphyxiation." The doctor walked them around the table to the victim's head. "Notice the marks around the mouth. A hard-edged object was affixed around the mouth and nose with considerable pressure. This blocked oxygen intake and smothered the victim. Normally, I would look for standard signs of asphyxiation, but the global bruising from the trauma makes it hard to be sure what caused what damage. But the facial marks are continuous, and there is clear cyanosis in the lips and fingers." "What's cyanosis?" Snyder asked. "Dark pigmenting, blue and purple of certain extremities upon prolonged oxygen deprivation." "Why kill someone like that?" "Motive is your job, detective, not mine. But the complete helplessness of the victim rendered such a procedure quite feasible." "Anything else?" asked Sacker. Only the lack of other things arises as evidence. Oh, good God. What does that mean? Standard procedure is to also check fingernails, teeth, and so forth for skin and other tissue that might belong to the murderer, usually obtained from struggling with the perpetrator. A pompous asshole. Yes, something we don't know? Sutherland sighed. Usually, from these studies, we get genome data from the victim, which of course must be filtered from the large background of data from microorganisms. If we're lucky, we also get other human DNA not matching the victim. Sometimes even traces of compounds that help us ID the location. Microorganisms? Asked Hill. Yes, bacteria, virus, fungi. We're pretty filthy creatures, you must understand. He sneered at Hill as if she might be contaminated. Except in this case, well, nothing. No signs of microbes in sequencing or in culture. No other DNA but that of the victim. How is that possible? Asked Sacker. To be honest with you, Detective, I'm not sure. Sutherland pursed his lips. Only some kind of extreme sterilization procedure could have achieved this. There is additional evidence that the body was refrigerated for some time prior to being left on the street. All samples and efforts to date the time of death run into the problem that the biochemistry of decay seemed to have begun in earnest on the evening before the body was discovered. The complete lack of a crime scene, the evidence of sophisticated tampering with the body. We may never know exactly when or where the victim died. At best, I can say that it wasn't more than several months ago. More questions than answers, said Sacker. Sutherland straightened and looped his fingers together. Quite a straightforward case for me, actually, requiring no further or more in-depth examination. The cause of death is obvious, with evidence of extreme trauma, mutilation, and death by smothering. There will be no further evidence from this body to link the death to the killer, I'm afraid. The challenge in this case, I assume, will be to determine why such extreme measures were taken and obtain other evidence. That, I'm afraid, is squarely in your domain, and not mine. The doctor wheeled away. He halted and spun back. You nearly had me forgetting. The killer left a calling card. The physician raised a plastic sample bag with a strip of paper inside. Faded letters ran across the ragged surface. Stuffed in his mouth. Jesus, what does it say? Asked Sacker, taking the bag and squinting at the paper. One small death of a man, one giant leap for womankind. Sutherland retrieved the bag from Sacker and returned it to the tray. Now, if you'll excuse me, we do have other unfortunate victims to examine today. Sacker shuffled out of the morgue, his mind racing. The case continued to grow stranger and more unsettling as facts rolled in. Hill and Snyder shadowed his steps as they made their way back from the basement to their fourth-floor offices. Does this hurt the theory of a revenge killing? Asked Hill. Sacker ran his hand over his close-cropped hair. I don't know. Sure doesn't seem to fit with your average payback. Who would have the expertise for this? Who would go to the lengths, even for revenge? But everything about this case is extreme. The killing, the torture, the public exhibition. I'm starting to think that we aren't dealing with your average angry Joe or Jane. Hill agreed. Yeah, it seems like Jack the Reaper tangled with the wrong person. A real psycho. He glared at his assistants. See that none of this gets out of the department. Outside of Ladner, no one is to hear a word until we've got a better handle on things. Remember, no one keeps secrets. No one. If you break that firewall once, it's over. The press is already foaming at the mouth for leaks. They both nodded as the elevator door opened. The three got inside. Meanwhile, he said, pressing a button, we need to get a list of all of Reaper's known victims. Their family members, too. Let's hope that it was one of them. But you said we don't know many of his victims, said Snyder. That's right. And the killer could be one of those we don't. but there's nothing else to work with. The revenge killing is still the most viable theory we have. It leads us to names and follow-up police work. We need names, locations, and professions of the victims and their family. And doctors or nurses in the group. Any doctors or nurses in the group, anyone with medical training, they are priority one from what Sutherland revealed. Psych profiles, criminal records, patterns, anything that might give someone a means beyond their obvious motives. "On it, sir," said Hill as they exited the elevator. Sacker gazed across the busy floor, the image of a corpse lodged in his mind. "Let's hope we find something soon. I've got a bad feeling about this case." That's the end of that chapter. Hey, Rob Rock. Molly Wagner. Well, I don't know if these people are still here, but they showed up, so they get called out. Hope Devlin. Craig. All right. Keep in mind that sometimes they don't show me who comes in. It's always rough. Craig, there's no sexy time today. Sorry to say. This is just kind of a thriller, spy kind of thing. A book that I did. This was about 2 years ago, so this is really when I was first starting out. I've certainly changed my approach to these a lot. And obviously you're hearing me stutter through some of this stuff, which happens. And I think it was a couple episodes ago I showed you what I do for editing and how I actually work real time. This is not real time. This is just fun time. I'm going to do one more quick chapter. 9. Out of Champagne. The Crown Victoria's suspension was shot. The car rocked over busted New York City streets, rattling bones on a big pothole and churning stomachs as they surfed warped roads resembling solidified lava. Riding shotgun, Snyder held his hand to his mouth. Hill spoke from behind. "With no clear time of death, month of death even, we're screwed. We can't narrow any suspects' locations, test alibis. And now that some jerks leaked Reaper's name to the press, it's that much harder to operate." A horn blared. Sacker refused to let a shouting cabbie cut him off. "Right. We're at a huge disadvantage, so we're moving fast. That's why we're on the road today. But we know something about the killing. There's a damn good chance our killer has medical expertise. Hard to imagine he or she doesn't. That narrows the list substantially. Now, we pray for a miracle. A reveal in the mannerisms, poorly concealed evidence we can glean without a warrant. Anything." "Mannerisms?" asked Hill. "Yeah, they don't teach you that in the academy," said Sacker. "I've broken open as many cases with intuition as I have with evidence. Partly experience, partly a sensitivity. It's all about paying attention to what's in front of you and getting out of your own head." "You have arrived at your destination," came the soulless voice of his GPS navigator. Sacker switched off his cell phone. Cursed with a terrible sense of direction, even the New York grids confused him. GPS might be embarrassing, but it was required. They pulled up to a brick-and-mortar, World War I era apartment complex. Scaffolding obscured the facade, workers pummeling the old brick to fine silt. Sacker imagined the dust worming into the apartments facing the orange cloud. Near New York Hospital, several medical institutions cooperatively owned the building to house staff. Their trauma surgeon lived on the second floor. As they approached, Sacker pulled his detectives aside. "Remember, this guy lost his wife 6 months ago. Suicide. He's got all kinds of motive, but let's try to move slowly." The door opened to reveal a disheveled figure in his 40s. His eyes were sunken, his face unshaved. Receding curly hair danced around his head. His features drew tight at the sight of the detectives. Sacker removed his hat. "Dr. Russo? Detectives Sacker, Hill, and Snyder. We called earlier." The doctor put his hand on the back of his neck. Yeah, right. Look, sorry for all this, but I was in the ER late last night. May we come in? Russo opened the door and shuffled into his small apartment. He motioned toward a couch and a set of chairs. Hale and Snyder sat on opposite sides of Sacker, wide-eyed, scanning the room. The apartment mimicked a museum piece, a space once occupied and tended, now frozen in place. Only the layering of dust testified to the passage of time. Sacker spied a narrow kitchen with piles of unwashed dishes. However useful Russo may or may not be in the... Darn it. We'll get there. However useful Russo may or may not be in the clinic, he let his life go. One thing stood out clearly in the disorder. Yesterday's New York Times, front page spread open on the coffee table before them, complete with a mugshot of Jack Reaper. Everything in place for one hell of a conversation. The doctor returned with a stained coffee mug and dropped into a wicker chair across from the detectives. He spoke over the steam. So, what can I do for you? We're here about the Reaper murder. Russo choked back a laugh. Sorry, I'm out of champagne. Sacker smiled. Might like this guy. I understand how you could feel that way, Dr. Russo. I trust you understand we have an investigation to conduct. Well, if you find the guy, I'll buy him dinner. Pin a fucking medal on him. What we're trying to ascertain, Dr. Russo... I'll save you the tap dance. I didn't kill the son of a bitch. Search my place. You won't find anything. I'm logged constantly at the hospital. Working until I drop is my way of avoiding more Working until I drop is my way of avoiding more therapy. I wouldn't have the energy to chase that monster down. Snyder cut in. Revenge can often bring a lot of energy. Russo drank from his cup and shook his head. Not in my nature, I'm sad to say. When I saw Linda in that hospital room, God, her face was a horror show. Swollen up so bad I could hardly tell it was her. You bet I wanted to hurt someone. But that only lasted so long. I could burn up with it, or I could take care of my wife. She was never the same. She needed me. I put my energies in healing, Detective. That's my whole life. And it wasn't enough. Was your wife in therapy after the assault? Asked Hill. She was raped and tortured for 3 days, left to die on the side of the road. What do you think? He scowled at Hill, who squirmed under his gaze. We saw individual therapists, did couples counseling. It failed. I failed. Something primitive snapped when my wife became the plaything of an animal like that. I hated myself for it. I tried. We worked hard in therapy. But I didn't step up, and Linda had a history with depression. She just couldn't get out of this hole. You can't imagine the pain she was in. Get this back on track. The reason we're here, Dr. Russo, said Sacker, is that we believe the killer possesses considerable medical training. Russo squinted. The mutilation? Yes. It's not the cutting of an amateur. More like an artist, said Russo. But I see where you're going. You're rounding up the folks in Reaper's You're rounding up the folks in Reaper's wreckage zone and picking out those like me. That's right. And that means you're in real trouble. Sacker winced. It's always harder with the smart ones. Russo waved his hand. It's all over your faces. You're desperate, knocking on doors, hoping for a bloody scalpel to fall out of someone's pocket. Damn it. Hale and Snyder glanced between the doctor and Sacker, who put on his best smile. Russo laughed. Well, good luck, detectives. But I don't think you're going to find anyone in this little group who's at all interested in helping you track down Jack Reaper's killer. He's our new hero. That's the end of Chapter 9. Hey there, Jennifer. Hi, Samantha. Seth Cannon from Dayton. Fantastic guitarist. Rich Folk. Welcome. I'm might be just about done, but let me see what else I can do here. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'm in my Studio Bricks audio booth. It's in my house. Keeps everything nice and quiet. The sound is completely isolated. We do live literally 15 minutes from Columbus Airport, so we get the Southwest jets flying directly overhead. So occasionally, when they're really low, the low end just kind of seeps through. There's really no home remedy for that at all. You'd have to go into the $30,000 range to even try to do that. And then you'd have to be in a basement. So this was pricey enough, but it allows me to work almost uninterrupted. So it's been really nice. I'll do one little quick section. It is. I'm trying to think. It was around $11,000, I think. It had to be shipped from Barcelona. So the shipping itself was like $1,800, which was kind of crazy. But all the other solutions I looked at just weren't going to be as good. And I had been upstairs with some moving blankets and PVC pipe, which was good for isolating the sound and making sure there wasn't reverb and echo and all that. But the planes, and we also lived just a half mile from train tracks. So every time that happened, I'd have to stop narrating. So that was getting to the point where it was every 3 or 4 minutes, just depending on the time of day. So I took care of that. And I love it. I don't do really long sessions just because of my lower back and feet and stuff like that. But I can still kind of go in and out whenever I please and try to get, when I'm working on a book, I try to get at least 2 hours of work done a day. Which doesn't seem like a whole lot, but the voice can only do so much. A little rough today, I'm not sure why. It's been an easy week. Okay. One more little part. Chapter 10. Serial Killer. Sacker eased the car into traffic and watched the towers of New York Hospital recede in his rear view. His trainees didn't speak. Their enthusiasm dashed on the heartbreak of a victim's husband. He decided to break the funk with some analysis. Okay, detectives, pop quiz. Your assessment of Russo. Rick? Snyder's eyes darted between Sacker and Hill. I don't know. Seemed pretty combative to me. Didn't show you much respect. Maybe he's hiding something. What makes he say that? He clearly had motive. He was practically cheering on the murder. Hill interrupted. And why wouldn't he? You heard what happened to his wife. What's your take, Kathy? Asked Sacker. Objectively, there was no evidence. Not that we searched or anything. But his hate for Reaper, too raw, too open to come from a killer hiding his crime. It just didn't feel right. Sacker nodded. I think we're going to see more Fred Russos as we go down the list. He stays on it, but for now, there's just not much for follow-up. We still should search his place, said Snyder. He was willing. We won't even need a warrant. Time's finite, Rick, said Sacker. We have 10 more names on this list, which is going to take us I don't know how long. Meanwhile, we need to keep the press at bay with something. Departmental resources are stretched pretty thin. So we don't search it? No, that's my call. I think it'll slow us down, put us off track, and it'll end up in the papers, which means when we find nothing, we look like idiots. Publicly. Sacker's phone buzzed. It's Ladner. This can't be good. He tapped the screen and dropped it into a cup holder. Hey, Mike. Driving back with Snyder and Hill. You're on speaker. A distorted voice crackled through the device. Change of plans, Tyrell. Everything's changed. We've got a second body. A second? That's right. From initial reports, it sounds like the same killer. Same M.O., down to the below-the-belt trimming. Bodies on 3rd and 68th. Oh, shit. That's right next to Canid. Exactly. Get your asses over there now and take control of the situation. Expect the cameras. Hang on to your badges. Sacker hit the sirens and pulled a U-turn. This is going to get ugly. There we go. Yeah, Samantha. So like I've said, if really this early part of the week, the middle part of the week is the best time for me to narrate. Today's just a little, it might be the humidity or whatever, but it has been a little rough this month. Kind of hurts the breathing too. But it's the best time to actually record because my voice is in better shape. And then when I start playing my shows Friday and Saturday night, the mornings after are the best times for editing because I really don't have much of a voice then. Peter Conrad, you signed on just in time for me to say goodbye. But thanks everyone for watching. Next Thursday will be a music live cast. I haven't decided what I want to play, so if you're interested in tuning in, send me a message on Facebook and let me know what you'd like to hear. We'll get it done. All right, folks. Have a great day.